And here
The
you're starting, and then it's good if you just say a word like as intro.
Hello, hello.
Wait.
My name is Sathyarthi Peloquin.
Wait.
I do Myofascial Energetic Release.
Is it on?
No.
Okay.
Wait.
Okay, great. Good morning.
Good morning.
Sathyarthi. And thank you for being here today. And it's great that we have a chance to talk about fascia and breath. And as I'm a biodynamic breathwork practitioner, and you're here to teach us about fascia. And they're so closely related in the work that we do, and yet they're also very complementary to each other, and in that sense also different. So it's nice to talk a little bit more about that relationship between fascia and breath. So that's why I asked you whether you wanted to talk about that with me this morning. And I know it's a very big topic, and you studied it for many years, and we now only have like 10-15 minutes. So it really will be like a talk in a nutshell about everything that you know. And before we go deeper into the topic, maybe you just want to share a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how you arrived here today after a whole path that you walked in your life.
I'll try to keep this like in a minute.
Yeah.
My name is Sathyarthi Peloquin, and I've been doing professionally deep body work for 46 years. I co-created a method that actually is big in the Netherlands called Rebalancing, which is a form of body work, deep body work. And I taught that for many years, and now I started new styles of bodywork since the last 5-6 years called Myofascial Energetic Release, which has similarities to rebalancing, but it's actually much different. And I travel all over the world, including here in Poland, and teach that. I've been teaching bodywork since almost 34 years. I've taught thousands of people, and many people are professionals that I've trained, and actually many people teach trainings that I've trained. It's a very rewarding, satisfying skill and art and science to bodywork, to teach it. I use it as a form of transformation, to help people transform. And breath, of course, is one of the main elements of transformation. You know, our breath patterns. Who we are is determined a lot by our breath patterns. How much energy we have, how deeply we can express ourselves, how deep we can go within ourselves, and how much energy we can contain is determined a lot by our breath pattern. We breathe 17,000 times a day, and so it's something that happens, throughout a huge amount of times every day, and so it affects us in ways that, of course, we don't understand. Now, with Myofascial Energetic Release, fascia work, I focus a lot on the breath, but I do specific work to open up the whole apparatus of breath.
Maybe just for the people watching this, fascia is our bindweefsel, as we call it in Dutch. And myofascia is our spear bindweefsel, just to get clear on the terms that we actually use.
Okay.
Yeah.
So fascia surrounds every tissue of the body. It's a container. It gives form to every part of the body, including all the cells of the body. And there's something like between 30 and 60 trillion cells in the body. So everyone has a membrane that's fascia. Every muscle has fascia surrounding it and penetrating it throughout the whole muscle. Every organ, every bone, every nerve, every vessel, the brain. The whole body is covered and penetrated and wrapped in fascia. So fascia connects the whole body together, including the lungs and the whole area that surround the lungs, the breathing apparatus, the diaphragm, the intercostals, the pectoralis group, the the trapezius and the neck, around the throat, all the area of breath around the tongue, the esophagus, and the trachea. That whole area is surrounded and penetrated by fascia. So the condition of the fascia, if the fascia is held in a tight, contracted place because we're holding our breath in some compromised pattern, the fascia will then keep our breath limited. It'll keep our breath small, or keep our breath up and not down. So with this work, Myofascial Energetic Release, I release the areas of the diaphragm, the belly, the chest, the psoas, the iliopsoas, and the pelvis. The three diaphragms, the pelvic diaphragm, the respiratory diaphragm, the thoracic inlet here, which is another diaphragm, and create balance and openness three-dimensionally, or expansion three-dimensionally, so that people potentially can have full, open, satisfying breaths, throughout the day. And when that happens, then energetically, of course, they become more alive and more full. Now, this is a process in fascial work, to release the breath, because you're not only releasing the diaphragm and the chest and the neck and the belly to release breath, because breath is connected through the whole body. So you have the external breath of taking oxygen in and expelling oxygen, yeah? And then you have the internal breath, where oxygen goes to all the cells and carbon dioxide comes out. And that happens on a cellular level. So the fascial condition, if the fascia is open and healthy, then oxygen flows through the fluids that bring oxygen to cells. It flows because there's an open, spacious area around the cells, a fluid base. If the fascia is tight, the cells don't get enough oxygen, yeah? And the area then doesn't get enough oxygen and tightens up more because it doesn't get enough oxygen. And then people experience, that chronic fatigue that is so popular these days, and chronic pain, which is related to not getting enough breath. But obviously, breath is the main movement that happens in us as human beings. So if breathing is three-dimensionally expanded, it massages all of the different internal organs, and it keeps our spine healthy. Yeah. Also, breath has an emotional and psychological element very strongly. It connects to our emotional state. If you're angry, your breathing has a certain pattern. If you're frightened, you hold your breath. If you're in shock, your breath is diminished, yeah? If you're happy and alive and full, your breath is fuller. If you're deep in a parasympathetic or meditative space, then your breath becomes quiet and relaxed, yeah? And it supports that deep relaxation. So breath can be opened by fascial work, and it does. I open breath all the time. In fact, in my work, I use breath throughout the session as part of the opening, and to contact people's energy and to bring them from an emergency state or sympathetic state into a parasympathetic state. Different than biodynamic breath and trauma work. It's different. It's the breath. I don't breathe as deeply and quickly, but I do breathe throughout the session. It is a connected breath that goes along with the body work.
But in Myofascial Energetic Release, you actually use it to support the session, whereas in biodynamic breathwork, it's used to support the release. Is that kind of how you use?
Yeah, I support the session, but I also support the release with breath, obviously. But it's not as strong as the breath in BBTR. It's not nearly as strong. Because the breath is not as deep, it's not as full, and it's not as quick. Yeah, but I use full deep breath, slower though. Yeah, and I follow the pattern of breathing. I watch it, and ask people to breathe in their feet, because actually breath goes throughout the whole fascial system. And when the fascial system's free, as you breathe, that movement is not limited to your thorax and belly and throat. It goes all the way from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet as a pulsation. Yeah, the breath, it moves through the system. The fascial system is an interconnected network. So as one part moves, it doesn't just stop there, it moves through the waves through the whole system. So breath does that. And therefore breath moves not only energy, it does move energy through the system, that invisible force we call energy, yeah? Our aliveness, yeah? But it also moves the body physiologically and anatomically. It moves parts as we breathe. So as I'm working on a foot, I'll say breathe into your foot. And what I mean is allow the movement of breath to move through the fascial system and reach the level of the foot. Yeah, wherever the fascial system is tight and highly contracted and blocked, obviously then the movement gets stuck there. So I use breath continuously, and I open people's breath. I always think that BBTR would help BBTR to have really good bodywork sessions, to open up the whole apparatus of breathing, to release the diaphragm, the intercostals, the abdominal muscles, and the psoas, and balance these three diaphragms. And then the breath would go much deeper and fuller. Yeah? And I've been involved myself, receiving a lot of breath sessions throughout my life in groups as well as privately. And I love breath work. Yeah, I think it's very powerful and very beautiful. And so I try to include it. I try to support people by opening awareness to their breathing, first of all, and then deepening their breath, supporting them, for instance, to breathe in their back. You know, when I do work with people structurally through this fascial work, I have them breathe in their back, because most people breathe in the front, sometimes a little in the sides, a little up, but when you look at their back as they stand, and you ask them to breathe in the back, it's very difficult. But on a natural breath, of course, would go expand three-dimensionally. So I look for where the blocks are as they breathe, and I ask them to breathe deep. And I look where the blocks are, where it's not moving, where it gets contracted and stuck. And I work in those areas to release them, and I teach and educate the person to keep breathing into those areas. So I'm very happy when BBTR people come to the training, because I feel like they have something that they can, you know, they already experienced so much through the breath work, and they can then add this to their breath sessions.
Yeah, just earlier this week, you also told us that the fascia, if you take everything out, all the organs, everything, the veins, then the fascia actually has to form the shape of your body. So in that sense, it's easy to say that, okay, you need to expand your breath, but if your fascia is really holding, then it may even be very hard for people to expand even their breasts, to allow more air into their torso to start with, let alone like the legs and the head, and to really expand it to the rest of the body. Can you say maybe a little bit about how that actually works in a fascia, that it gets so kind of tense that it
Well,
fits together?
Our structure is a reflection of our emotional state and our psychological state. So all of us live in some type of defense pattern. Mostly it's unconscious, and some of it is conscious, but mostly it lives unconsciously. And that defense pattern, you know, creates all kinds of negative beliefs and concepts about ourselves, all kinds of self-judgment through the superego, yeah? And lots of fear, lots of pain, lots of sadness, and often unexpressed anger. And lots of ways in which we sabotage our life energy. But that is held not only in the mind and in the emotional body, but it's held in the physical body, because the mind and body are one organic unity. So however we hold ourselves physically determines how we see ourselves, what our self-image is. So through the wounding, through the abandonment wound, through the abuse that happened as children, and the abandonment and the abuse that happens as adults, our body contracts, yeah, and holds that contraction. If it's repetitive, which it is as a child, our body will hold the form, yeah, around that basic wound, connected to a developmental need. For instance, the need for contact at the first year of life, you know, when the child is symbiotic. If the mother is not able to meet that need enough, the child collapses on their need, like this, which is a very common pattern. And they have a hard time breathing. They can't nourish themselves because there's such a lack of nourishment. The chest collapses down and back, the head goes forward, yeah, the shoulder vertebra rolls forward, the diaphragm tightens, and the energy pulls out of the extremities and comes more in. It's a fear type. And that's all based on a basic developmental need, which is the need for symbiotic contact at that age, that developmental time in their life. And if it's not met enough through a mother being depressed or a mother abandoning the child in whatever way, the child falls into that. Yeah, and there's, you know, six different character structures. Sometimes in some systems up to 7 or 8. Depending, but with Reich it was 5, yeah, and with bioenergetics it's 5. But those holding patterns are molded and held together by the fascia. Yeah, the fascia is what holds with the muscle, the myofascia. Myo means muscle, and the fascia is basically the glue that holds it together. Yeah, the beautiful thing about fascia is fascia can be released through deep touch, through movement, through breath.
Okay, and it's an elastic.
And it's plastic. Yeah. It's elastic is like a rubber band, like a muscle where you stretch it and it pops back. But fascia has a plastic thing where you can stretch it and it stays stretched. Like saran wrap is a good example. You stretch it and it stays stretched, yeah? And so fascia has that ability to release from holding, yeah? And fascia has a fluid base, you know. It's 70% of fascia is fluid. And when fascia is healthy, that fluid is in its natural state. Yeah, and the body then is very fluid because fascia is the biggest organ in the body. They used to think it was skin, now they know it's fascia. And so fascia surrounds and penetrates everything. So when this healthy fascia, there's fluid fascia. Yeah, where when you breathe, the different muscles and parts slide over each other, yeah, and everything has a place, and everything then slides and moves, and you see it, their spine then moves as you breathe. When fascia is rigid with trauma, yeah, or bad patterns, yeah, like if I sit like this for a long time, then my body patterns itself this way. And we do, we sit in front of screens, and at work and at home, and sit like this for a long time. The collagen then gets, because of this position, takes a lot of stress. What fascia does naturally then, it brings more collagen, you know. Collagen is the main tissue that lives in fascia. It's a protein and it's a building block for the whole body. And if I sit like this, they say after 20 minutes, collagen gets injected all through here and it builds up, yeah? So how you use your body also determines, you know, a lot around how you breathe. If I sit like this, it's hard to breathe. If I sit like this and become conscious of how I'm sitting, and I have a base of support and I have expansion, my breathing deepens, yeah?
So then how we get those, we sometimes feel those blocked things in our shoulders, we ask our friends to just massage that for a little bit. Is that the collagen that gets stuck in those tissues?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like that hard, kind of fibrous tissue that everybody wants to have somebody go into their shoulders and release.
Thank you. That was already a lot of information about fascia. And when you started about talking a little bit about yourself, you said like 5 or 6 years ago, I actually moved from rebalancing more into myofascial energetic release. What was your impulse? Why did you think like, oh, that's actually my next move that I have to make? What gave you the impulse to make that move?
I realized that my work was changing, how I was doing it, and how I was approaching people with it. And I could have kept going with rebalancing, because rebalancing has a big acceptance for lots of different work. But then I was watching, there's many rebalancing schools that have started, and I was watching what they were teaching, and I was feeling it's not really my thing anymore. It's not what I'm teaching and what I want to teach. So I wanted to disconnect from that and start something new and have another vision or approach to bodywork, which is what I've been doing with this.
And that's probably a personal question, but who inspires you? Who is your, if you look around and who would you love to work with? Like if there's somebody out there who does great work, you think like, oh, I would love to work with that person. Where do you get your own nourishment in developing this work? And
that's a good question. And like now I'm going to do this dissectomy course here in the Institute, and I'd like to work with that person and do that dissectomy course, because I feel like, we're dissecting fascia, and I have never done that, and I really want to do that. So that inspires me. And there's some, I also teach therapy groups, the Path of Love and different groups. And so now I'm going to do the diamond work, with almas, that kind of work I want to learn. And I did the trauma work with Peter Levine. And there's some body work trainers that I would like to. I'd like to do some work with John Barnes in America, do some of his unwinding, just to see how he does it, and incorporate it more into. I do incorporate unwinding, but just to see how he does it. I'm not so interested in some of these really well-known deep body workers like Tom Myers and these guys. It's like I just find their work, for me personally, too structural, too anatomical, it's just not so interesting to me. So, I like to read them because I like to understand it. And they're really, I honor them, because they're giving so much, but it's not my thing, This work, I find, what over the years I've created also by being an Osho sannyasin, that's the name Sathyarthi, is that it became much more holistic than a lot of these deep structural bodyworks that are around. And I include movement through unwinding, I include breath, I include emotional awareness and release, and energy awareness and release. And a lot of these structural bodywork trainings that are just anatomical, somehow much more than just anatomical, very well done, and strokes and structural understanding, but without the emotional and energetic understanding. So right now I'm not that inspired by anybody out there, to be that honest. I read them. The therapists, some of the therapists like Almas and Faisal and of course Peter Levine and all of these people, and these people inspire me at this point. But the bodywork world, I read it and it's interesting to me, and I learn, and and I love the fascial teaching that's happening now. There's big conferences, and fascia's become a catchword. It's in training, it's in everywhere. Personal training, it becomes bigger and bigger because of these people who are doing the research, like Robert Schlepp, he's doing the research. And I knew him from sannyas. He came and did a training with me years and years ago. But yeah, I'm interested in that. But actually the people's techniques, they don't interest me at all. And it's nothing against their techniques. They're doing beautiful work, but it's not interesting to me, yeah, at all.
Thank you. I think this is already more than far more than 10 minutes, but thank you very much for being here today and saying what it's important for as well as breath workers as it is for our clients to better understand how the body works together with the breath and the fascia and other organs as well. So there's much more to say about it, but thank you so much for that, and looking forward to finishing off today.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Great.
Okay.
Nice.
Good.
And I switch off.